Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance.
One of the last things you ever want to hear is a controller who sounds, I guess, excited, for lack of a better word, saying your call sign and telling you to reject your takeoff. Because one of the first things that I'm going to be thinking about as a pilot is, what did I do wrong and how much trouble am I in? This video, like a lot of my recent videos, is taking place in JFK. But unlike a lot of my past videos, where I normally trim out all the different audio of the different planes so you can really focus on the story, I'm going to show you just how busy places like JFK can be. It's not as busy as some other airports, but JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, pretty busy airspace on the ground and while you're flying. I still think Chicago is probably one of the fastest moving ground airports that you'll ever experience, so I feel really bad if English isn't your first language moving around in an airport like this, but JFK is moving quickly, and just to put it all together for this video, I'm going to let you hear all the other traffic that's going on. So here's what happened.
American 106 Heavy Cross runway 31 left at Kilo.
Delta 1943, wind 35018, gust 24, runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 4 left, Delta 1943.
JetBlue 918, Canadian Tower, runway 4 left, line up and wait.
4 left, line up and wait, JetBlue 918.
American 185, Canadian Tower.
Go ahead for American 185.
American 185, runway 31 left, Kilo Echo, line up and wait.
Line up and wait, 31 left at Kilo Echo for American 185.
Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance. Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance.
Rejecting.
A lot is going on, right? First you have American 106, they're told to cross 31 left at Kilo, right here.
American 106 Heavy Cross runway 31 left at Kilo.
You have Delta 1943 told they're cleared for takeoff on runway 4 left.
Delta 1943, wind 35018, gust 24, runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
Behind that Delta takeoff, you have JetBlue told to line up and wait behind Delta.
JetBlue 918, Canadian Tower, runway 4 left, line up and wait.
And you also had American 185 told to line up and wait on 31 left at Kilo Echo.
American 185, runway 31 left, Kilo Echo, line up and wait.
Now this is normal. This is how busy it is. So if you're there and you're moving around, you got to listen up very closely for your call sign, for your airline's call sign, and then your flight number. So you got to be paying a lot of attention when you're moving around in these types of very busy airports. Now, one of the things that I think was happening was they were going to line up this guy here onto 31 left, but they were going to let Delta take off, then let American take off on 31 left because they didn't want his jet blast hitting the plane taking off from runway 4 left. I don't know that to be the case, but I believe, in one case had experience of jet blast coming from the side when I was taking off, and it is a very quick reaction time. But the problem is this: if you're going down the runway really fast and you get a big blast of air because the plane is on a taxiway or on another intersecting runway like that, or perpendicular, and they put a bunch of power onto their turbine engines, it's going to blow a lot of air, but only on one wing of your aircraft. So you can imagine that would be a problem because it starts to blow that wing up in the air. However, if you make the correction and you overcorrect and don't take it out, then you can end up slamming that same wing into the ground. Because if you feel like it's a bunch of wind that's hitting your wing, there usually isn't going to go away right away. So you'll put a bunch of correction into your yoke, but it's a split second. Now that wing wants to go down to the ground, and if you're going fast enough, it will actually cause a wing strike. And there are zero snacks for wing strikes. So my guess is as soon as Delta would have passed 31 left, they were going to fire this American plane off. And then as soon as Delta got out of the way, that JetBlue would have taken off behind them. And life would have been good. But Delta got told to reject. Why? Check this out.
All right, and the Delta 1943.
Yeah, Delta 1943, are you able to taxi or need a couple minutes to run checks?
Yeah, we can get up the runway, Delta 1943.
Delta 1943, turn left, Juliet, and just remain clear of runway 4 left.
Left on Juliet, and remain clear runway 4 left for Delta 1943.
JetBlue 918 is going to be more than 90 seconds in position.
Yeah, JetBlue 918, roger.
American 106 Heavy.
106 Heavy, go ahead.
American 106 Heavy, possible pilot deviation. I have a number for you. Advise ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
American 106 Heavy, stand by.
No, American 106 Heavy.
American 106 Heavy.
The last clearance we were given, we were cleared to cross. Is that correct?
American 106 Heavy, we're departing runway 4 left. I guess we'll listen to the tapes, but you were supposed to depart runway 4 left. You're currently holding short of 31 left.
Roger, American 106 Heavy.
At every airline, when I was flying private and Part 135, so private jets and stuff like that, or when I've been at any airline, we always verbalize and trust but verify, meaning you're going to look out the window and say, clear left, and if you're sitting in the left seat, and you're going to look out the right and say, clear right, if you're looking out the right seat. So as you pull up to the intersection here, if you're sitting in the left seat, you would look forward and all the way to your left, and say clear left, and at the same time the person sitting in the right seat would look forward and all the way to the right, and they'd say clear right. And then you would say clear to cross, or somebody would say clear to cross, meaning like you look left, I look right, we are in agreement that we're clear to cross. It's one of these things that I always verbalize because I want to say what I'm doing, so if somebody else that's sitting there heard something else or thought they heard something else, they can go, no, we're not clear to cross, right? So you verbalize that, or I do, I verbalize that. Then what you do, daytime or nighttime, is turn on all the lights. Now you might be thinking like, okay, you can't see a 747 in the middle of the day. What are these little flashing lights on the wings really going to do? But it's a muscle memory thing. In the daytime, I still turn on my lights. Those are the rules. You turn on all your lights, and just like if you were getting onto the runway for takeoff, you put on everything just to reduce the risk of somebody accidentally hitting you. You do that at daytime, and you do that at nighttime. So you might be looking at this thinking like, how do you not see a plane that's crossing the runway? But all this was actually taking place at night. And from the Delta's perspective, they would have seen some lights, but it would have been quite in the distance. However, Americans should have been able to see all the forward-facing lights of the mighty 737. So whoever was sitting in the right seat as they were coming up into that intersection should have looked to the right and said, clear right. And if you're the captain who's sitting in the left seat, they should have looked to the left and said, clear left, but always, and every captain that I've seen, they normally also, after they've looked left, regardless of what the other guys say, also look to the right, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for the entire plane. Regardless, that person to the right of you could say, clear right, and you could be like, great, and you go across and you get violated and you get in trouble. Well, it doesn't, or you get hit by another plane, it doesn't really matter. So most of the time, captains that I normally see, they'll look left and they'll look right, regardless of what they say. It's good to have two sets of eyes doing it, and regardless of whatever seat that I was in, I would normally look one direction and then look the other directions as well, because I'm going to be in trouble or killed if I don't look that way. So why not have two sets of eyes? But that's just typically how it works. Now, the reason I'm guessing this Delta crew let out this audible sigh on the radio,
all right, then, the Delta 1943.
Was because that distance from when that American plane was crossing over their runway that they were taking off from is roughly about 4,000 feet. So they would have been able to get up quite a bit of speed as they were going up there. And one of the riskiest maneuvers that you're ever going to have to do, or as an airline pilot, is a high-speed reject. There is a lot of things that can go wrong. We do it in the sim all the time, but in real life, it's very different. When you do a high-speed reject, you have to pull back the thrust levers, which is easy enough. Then on some planes, you actually have to reach over and verify that this lever and the speed brakes have come back all the way. Then your hands go back over to the thrust reversers and pull those thrust reversers. So your right hand is doing that, while simultaneously, your feet are steering the plane down the runway. But you can't let your feet go up too high on the pedals, because that will kick off this button right here, which is the RTO, or the rejected takeoff setting. That is where the plane will notice based off of the things that you're doing that you want to reject a takeoff, and it will give you your best, smoothest, safest, most efficient braking. So if you do something like put your feet up on the pedals, it will kick that system off. So you actually have to keep your feet lower here on these pedals as you're steering. Then as your plane starts to decelerate, if you're not going perfectly down the middle of the runway, the rudder starts to lose effectiveness. So now your left hand needs to reach over for this tiller to keep you from going off the side of the runway. Now, I had in a simulator once, I had an instructor give me like a low speed reject. We weren't going really fast, but it was a low speed reject. And the normal inclination for a pilot to steer after your plane is moving is to use your feet, because you normally only use your hand and your tiller when you're just taxiing around. Once you get on the runway, you start going fast, you have rudder effectiveness, so you're used to using your feet. However, at a very slow speed, you now have to use your hand. But if you use your hand and use that tiller and you're going too fast, there's a lot of motion that's going on. So you could easily hurt somebody, because you have a lot more turning ability with that tiller than you do with your feet. So I was able to keep the plane on the runway, but it's a lot that's going on, as you can imagine. You got your hands, you got both feet and your left hand, all while you're looking outside and you're watching this closure rate on this plane that's now right in the middle of your runway that you're planning to take off from. So there's a lot that's going on, and it's easy to say, okay, don't bring your feet up and tap off the RTO, tap off the brakes. It's easy to say that, but the reality is that if you're going that fast, your instinct is going to say, like, hit the brakes, right? It's very hard, and I've known pilots that have rejected a takeoff and just instinctively put their feet up on the brakes. And the problem is that when you do that, if you're going up really fast on let's say a large plane like a 747, you can easily melt and blow all the tires, which is very expensive. But as your plane comes to a stop, you're still not done. You have to quickly make an announcement to the cabin crew so they don't evacuate. Because if you're a flight attendant and you're on a plane, you're planning on taking off, and all of a sudden you come to this fast stop, you don't know what's going on. So in some cases, there have been some cases where they come to a stop on the runway, there's no announcement from the flight crew of what's going on. So there are scenarios in which the flight attendants will just go blow the slides and get off the plane because they think there's something that's going on, nobody's telling me what's going on, evacuate. And everybody gets off the plane. And now you have 100 or 200 people running around JFK Airport at night. As you can imagine, that would be a problem. So all of that's happening in 5 or 10 seconds. It's a lot that's going on, and it's something that we will do in the simulator once or twice a year maybe. But again, you can simulate things a million times. In the real world, it doesn't go that way unless you rely on your training. So meanwhile, the guy in the left seat is doing all this. The first officer, I'm just guessing in this particular case, let's say he is the one that's not flying. He's supposed to mentally note the speed that they rejected at, as well as notify ATC of the rejected takeoff. And all while backing up the captain to make sure that all the things that he was supposed to do, like thrust reversers and speed brakes and power and all of this stuff, all those proper calls are happening so they don't go barreling into the plane up ahead of them. So how did air traffic control see this before the plane that was crossing the runway and the guys that were supposed to be taking off, why did they see it? How did air traffic control from, I don't know, a mile or ish away be able to see that before these guys that were 100 feet away from each other? How did that work? Well, air traffic control has these warning systems in place. So in this situation, as Delta's starting to do their takeoff roll and another plane actually enters the runway, they get an alert. Now, it's an amazing safety feature, but there are countries that have better systems. And luckily enough for me, I've been able to see a lot of the countries. The one that comes to mind that's my favorite, that I think is built for someone of my intelligence, is in Incheon, South Korea. They have this feature where they show you where you're going to go by putting green lights on the ground. And they say, hey, Boeing 123, follow the greens. And you're like, great, that's perfect for me. Anybody can do that. So on a complex taxi, they'll follow the greens and you'll follow them up and they'll say, follow the greens, hold short of runway 15 right, for example. So you'll follow the greens all the way around, and as you get up to 15 right, there will be these red bars that are there. So all the way across the front of that, the entry point onto that runway, there will be red bars. So you'll follow the greens all the way to there, and then they'll say, okay, clear to cross 15 right, hold short, 15 left. Boom, those red lights on the runway, they go away, and then you slide up to the next runway, and there's another set of red lights. And they do that all the way around the airport. But that system, I imagine, is very expensive to install, and luckily our government has found a lot of other ways to very wastefully spend our money than to invest it in safety and infrastructure. So what happened next?
Delta 1943, monitor ground 121.9er.
21-9, Delta 1943.
American 106 Heavy, you're going to depart 31 left now, confirm?
Okay, sir. Yes, we're still trying to get that number. They had us wait 5 minutes.
Okay, you would need to make the phone call first?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
American ended up taking off about 30 minutes later, and what I would assume would have been a very uncomfortable flight. And during that time, the pilots that were up there would have been discussing who didn't do what or what happened. And they would have talked and probably replayed it a million different times in their head, as well as talking out to figure out exactly what happened and how they could make such a grave error of getting lost. Now, I will say JFK at night is a very complex airport. There's like bending taxiways, and it's very complicated. I'm not going to lie. I go there maybe 10 times a year. There are a lot of pilots, though, that's their base, or that they operate out of that airport in and out all the time. At my airline, we operate around all the airports all of the time. There is no like, oh, this is my place that I normally fly out of most of the time. No, it's all of the airports everywhere in the world, every sector, which makes it challenging for us, in my opinion, more challenging than most pilots that do commercial flying because of the different rules and different way things get handled in different places in the world, and there's different nuances of what gets handled in different parts of the world. So what's happening in these pilots in this situation is they're going to have this very long flight where they're going to be talking about it with each other about what happened and how they messed up, and they're going to have to explain to a bunch of people how they were able to do this. And I'm sure there's going to be some extra training involved after this situation to prevent it from ever happening again. But the problem is we'll never know what really was going on the flight deck when they cross this runway, because the cockpit voice recorder, which records all this stuff, runs on a loop, which means since they took off about 30 minutes later and completed their flight, it covered up everything that was being said during that time. So we'll never really know except for what they disclosed to everybody, and that's really the end of it. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.